I'm posting from my phone, so apologies for weird formatting or bad grammar. When I was 18, I was living in a small town. I was friends with a ratty skater around, and they helped connect me with this dude who sold weed. He was 29 at the time, gave me pretty good deals, and lived nearby. I wasn't driving at the time, so this was convenient for me. His name was Max. Max has always struck me as a weird dude, but I honestly quite liked his weirdness. Not in a romantic way or anything, but I like weird people. We had normal weed buying interactions that never lasted more than 10 minutes. Buy some weed, maybe smoke a bowl, that's it. He'd offered to tell me he could drop it by my house, but I never let him because, as I said before, he was weird. I wasn't afraid of him, but was definitely aware that he and his offers to deliver were weird. One day in May 2018, I was invited to a bonfire by the same ratty skaters that introduced me to this guy. I had no idea he'd be there, nor was it important to me at all. I brought the guy I was dating at the time. I said hey to everyone, including Max. We stayed for a couple hours and then we played some music on the guitars. Nearing the time I was leaving the bonfire around 11, Max was getting upset about something and threw his guitar in the bonfire. I didn't know what he was so angry or upset about and paid no mind to it. This happened as I was leaving with the guy I was dating. I went to bed and woke up to paragraphs on paragraphs of crazy text from Max ranging from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. like a constant stream of text stating things such as, "You know how much I loved you. You're a cruel bitch." He would go back and forth between saying, "I would give you the world if you'd let me, and you really do deserve him though." He said really scary things like, "You are a predator, and should be snubbed out. Just wait. And you are stuck. I will either love you or hate you. To the fullest extent of my powers, behold. Right now, I pray the worst death on you. And that fuckboy bitch." To top it off, he said, "Losing you is like losing a mother to me," and told me to tell him I never loved him, and that I wouldn't hear from him again if I did. So that's what I did. I said I never loved you. Do not message me again, and left it at that. I didn't get a response, nor did I care to get one. Max had never expressed any romantic interest, asked me out or anything. This was all out of nowhere, and he was 11 years older than me. I was barely 18. That night, he cut his long hair off and posted some photos naked on Facebook, curled up in the fetal position, talking about being a statue of shame. It's as if he had a breakdown, but I had no intention of causing that. And I didn't think I even offended anyone by bringing that guy I was seeing. Everyone else seemed to like the guy I brought. About a week later, Max texted me pretty late at night and asked me if I had seen flowers he spread along the sidewalk, saying that he stole every flower in the vicinity of my neighborhood that night. I asked how he knew where I lived, and he said I hadn't seen the flowers, so he must have gone to the wrong house. I also told him he shouldn't do that, as I had never felt anything for him, and so on. He told me that he had heard I lived on the same block as another one of the skater guys that we're both friends with, and he wasn't wrong. The skater guy I lived by was on the other side of the block, and I never walked that way, so I never saw the flowers. I blocked his number and didn't hear from him again for weeks. Weeks later, I woke up after a rough night, and there were loads of flowers on the sidewalk, right outside my house, along with a little bouquet at the top of my sidewalk. I was pissed. I wasn't scared yet, and stupidly I unblocked his number, and texted him asking why the fuck there were flowers outside my house. This confirmed that this indeed was where I lived. I still to this day feel so stupid for texting him, and making it known that after weeks he had found my house. He responded saying, sounds nice. 'Twas me. I bitched him out basically and blocked his number again. About a week later, I was out of town and my roommate texted me a photo of a heart with a peace sign inside of it, with my name written under it, drawn in chalk outside of our house. When I got back into town, I went to the courthouse and began the process of getting a stalking order against him. When I left the courthouse, I went to Max's work. and told him he needed to stop this behavior and that he was stalking me. He looked me in the eye with no facial expression and said, "If you don't leave, I'm calling the cops." I got angry and said loudly, "Call the cops. I was just talking to them about you." I left his work in a rage. Soon after this, I began driving again. I once drove by him and he noticed it was me. The next day I woke up with my car covered in flowers. I presented my case to the judge and she just put the stalking order in place. He was served with it by police officers, and I thought that was that, and he wouldn't be bothering me again. I was wrong. After the restraining order was served, he made several other chalk messages on my sidewalk, left random gifts for me, like chalk, and beheaded My Little Pony heads on beer bottles. I always brought these things to the police station, but they said I needed to catch him doing it, take a photo or get security cameras. So I got a security camera and really hoped I would catch him. It turned out my security camera was stupid and I couldn't just watch the videos. It took, but had to skip through second by hand. It was an impossible task. I was terrified of leaving my house at night. At this point, I never had my curtains open anymore, and I was also so frustrated that my livelihood was being taken away from me. Ultimately, I unblocked his number, in hopes that he would directly violate the restraining order, and after a few days, it worked. He sent me a weird text saying something like, "Forgive me. We are charming this and harming. Let us try again." By now, it's September 2019, and he finally goes to jail. He is facing up to a year in jail and has to stay there until the court date. I finally start calming down. I'm able to go outside at night, even if just to get to my car. I let myself have my curtains open sometimes. I'm starting to feel alive again. Right when I'm feeling secure in my small town life again, someone posted bail and he was released. Only 3 months in jail and I went back to living in fear. We still had court dates coming up and I was still optimistic that he would be serving more time for ruining my life for so long. His lawyer kept pushing back the court date to gather evidence, and after about 6 months of pushing it back, the state decided it wouldn't do anything more and closed the case basically. I had moved out of my town 3+ hours away at this point, so he didn't actually have an option to continue this behavior. Living in this new place, I feel safe. I can walk at night and I don't have my curtains closed all the time. It's been over a year now since they decided to close the case. About a month ago, he began responding to my friends' Instagram stories, friends that live here in this new town, telling them how fond he is of me, etc. I have always had him blocked, but my Instagram isn't private, so he must have found them that way. I have since changed my account to private, and he hasn't messaged any more of my friends. I refuse to live in fear now, the way I was then, and he will never find where I live or where I work now. However, my life has changed forever after this experience. I will always be more aware of people and their weird energy. I will always close my curtains early in the evening and make sure all the windows and doors are locked. I will always live a little bit in fear, maybe not of him, but of it happening again. He ruined my life for a year, and I truly wish he had gotten that time in jail. He deserves it. So Max, let's never meet again. I'm on mobile, so please don't mind the grammar. Anyways, it was late at night and I was sneaking out of my girlfriend's house with her to go to somewhere with our friend. Me and my girlfriend waited across the street on some church stairs, waiting for our friend to pick us up. We were just chatting about our plans for the night and whatnot when we noticed some guy walk to our neighbor's car. It was around 1, and we started paying attention to this man as his whole demeanor was strange. He looked inside, walked across the street, and then, not sure if he noticed us at this point, crouched and hid by a tree when a car drove by. We didn't know what he was doing at the time, but he was hiding so the passing cars didn't notice him. As the cars leave, he gets up and continues down the street looking into cars. At this point, I'm texting our friend asking if he could hurry, and he says he's having trouble sneaking the car out of his house without his parents knowing. We're pretty rebellious, if you ask me. Just kidding. But he says he'll be soon. This is when the man crosses the street to the side where me and my girlfriend are waiting. Clearly doesn't notice us sitting on the stairs under a light. He goes to a car and opens the trunk of it. He crawls right in and closes it back up. The car was an SUV type. He's doing God knows what in the car for about 5 minutes. The whole car is slightly shaking. He gets out and starts walking down the street, where he finally notices me and my girlfriend sitting. He just looks at us, mumbles something under his breath, and puts a fist out for a fist bump. I'm no stranger to weirdos, so I fist bump him, and he mumbles something again and just walks off. It looks like he had little kid book bags on because it had some sort of graphic on it. Our friend came not even 30 seconds after that, and asked if we had seen a guy walking on the sidewalk. He said he didn't notice anyone. We think the guy was hiding from him as he drove by as well. That was that. I called the police just to make sure they knew, and to have a patrol car out in case he came back to the car. Not sure if he was ever caught. I'll always wonder what you were up to. Creepy guy who was able to silently close the trunk. Recently found this subreddit, but this happened about 6 months ago. I live in an apartment with 4 floors. There's a man that lives on the 4th floor. He's about middle-aged. I've always only ever seen him with his mom, because she is the one who guides him around, and usually doesn't leave him unattended. I notice every time I see him, this man, he has eyes stuck on me. Literally once he sees me, there's no looking away. He has the creepiest stare. Fast forward to the day where I felt the most vulnerable. I was walking up to my apartment complex. Usually the walk is a bit long. Once I'm a couple steps from my door, I noticed a familiar face. Yes, it was him. He was alone this time, which made me scared to death, not knowing what he would do. He stared at me from the moment when he saw me to the moment I closed the door and locked it behind me. 5 minutes passed by, and I'm in my room eating and I hear my mom talking to someone in the living room. I walk out and it was him. Why the fuck did my mom think it was okay to let him in? I don't know. Apparently he was ringing the doorbell nonstop until he got someone's attention, which happened to be my mom's. My mom opened the door and asked what he wanted, and he shoves my mom, pushes the door open, walks in and points to my room, saying, "My girlfriend. My girlfriend's in there," which was creepy that he knew which exact room to point to. My mom proceeds to say that no one was home at the moment. That was when my sister heard him and walked out. My sister kicks him out immediately. A couple minutes later, he's ringing the doorbell nonstop. This later goes on for another annoying 2 hours, with the doorbell consistently ringing. My sister looks into the peephole once in a while. This man in his whole face is in the peephole, and is laughing to himself while my sister is cursing him on the other side. He bangs the door here and there, but is constantly being creepy through the peephole. Every other time we would look through the peephole, he either has his head down, his face in the peephole, or him walking back and forth laughing at himself. This proceeds for a while until I call the cops. You know how that goes. I called 3 times, and waited for about 2 hours, waiting on the other side of the door while this man would not leave me alone. Cops didn't do shit. I haven't seen the man since, but I'm still scared of any future encounters. Never want to experience this again. So, to the creepy neighbor on the 4th floor, let's not meet. So this story happened when my best friend and I were about 15 years old. I'm sorry for my bad English, I'm not a native speaker. We had to take an important exam at the end of the year, so we attended some private sessions in order to prepare. Because of this, we only hung out on Saturdays, after 5 p.m. We were at the mall, and after a bit of window shopping, she asked me to come outside, in the park, so she could smoke a cigarette. She took it from her mother, but I didn't smoke. I have never liked it. I accepted as I was used to her requirement. So, we're in the mall's parking lot while she's smoking that damn cigarette. It was like 6 p.m., but it was already dark outside, as this happened in winter. Let me describe you the place where we were. This was a large park, full of trees and big rectangular-shaped bushes. On the side aisle, there were some restaurants at a full 10-meter gap. An exit to a dark street and to the parking lot. Another big space and a place for skating. We thought that we were 100% safe, as we were still walking on the mall's property. We arrived near the strange exit when a 5'9" man approaches us and asks for a cigarette. My friend tells him that she doesn't have any other cigarettes because she got this one from someone else too. He seemed to be in his late 40s, wasn't shaved, wearing a red hood, which almost covered his eyes. I tell him that we have to go, to which he responds with some incoherent words. We both knew that something was off, so we made some steps back. "Why are you scared? I won't do anything to you," he said as he was approaching. Silence. "Don't worry, I've met a lot of girls like you," he said, and then started to mumble other words. I couldn't understand. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know if he had any weapons. Behind us was a big bush, and in front of us was him. If we chose to run in different directions, he would be able to catch at least one of us, and probably take her with him. There weren't many people, but the ones who were passing by didn't seem to care about our terrified looks. My friend started to repeat that she was sorry, but she couldn't help him, and I think that one of the passerbys heard her. Fortunately, a man, maybe 6'3", who looked a lot more younger and stronger than the creep, stopped and asked him why he was bothering us. He wasn't given a response. My friend took the chance and crushed her cigarette with her foot as quickly as possible, and started running. I, as a complete idiot, remained frozen for a few seconds, and looked at her savior's eyes, then started sprinting. I'm not sure how to translate it, but the 6'3" man said in a strange language, something across the lines of, "Fly ahead," while I started to depart. We didn't stop running until we were sure that they couldn't see us anymore. Both of them left, and we went back to the mall safely, and we never told anyone about this encounter. So, creep from the mall. Let's not meet again. This happened around 10 years ago, and in the south of the UK. For reference, I'm a 28-year-old male, and at the time I was working part-time at a fuel station, on a road which linked a small village to a ring road into a nearby city. The village itself was quiet, high-end and extremely expensive to live in. It was the sort of place that you only had one chain store, and it was a Waitrose. Everything else was either boutiques or privately owned gourmet grocers. So, as someone who has always enjoyed cars, it was always fun to see what kind of high-end luxury sports cars would adorn from the forecourt on any given day. This is where I met Michael. Michael was in his late 40s, dark hair, and well-dressed. Always wore Grand or Ralph Lauren, or, on his work days, tailored canali suits, etc. He was an all-around nice guy, exceptionally polite, which was actually a rarity, as most of the residents of the surrounding area seemed to despise anyone who didn't qualify for the additional tax bracket. We got chatting about his collection of vehicles, or the watches he wore. He always showed up wearing some kind of Rolex and driving an Aston Martin, Range Rover, or Porsche, so there was always a lot to talk about. I got to know that he worked in finance, and the conversation got into what I was planning to do with my life, also to work in finance. And we would always have these pleasant conversations until I left that part-time job in favor of taking up an apprenticeship role at my uncle's brokerage. Michael is important, and we'll get to that why shortly. Something to be known about my uncle is that he is a man with a lot of fingers and a lot of pies, literally, as well as his brokerage and property portfolio. He also owned a few takeaway for cash flow purposes. I think we all know what that means. And as such, I'd occasionally step in a delivery driver when a driver would let him down. Luckily, my uncle also lived in a previously mentioned village, and the main pizza place he owned catered to the residents of said village, so tips were usually quite decent, and my uncle would usually throw me a few quid for helping out. Fast forward to the summer of 2008, I've been roped into dropping off a few pods at a property on an extremely prestigious road. Average house, priced well above 1.4 million. And I'm intrigued to actually get close enough to see these houses actually look like, as they're all gated, and set far back from the road behind a shroud of trees and shrubs. So I find the place and buzz the intercom, when a voice comes back, sort of muffled, just saying, "Yes?" So I answered with the name on the takeaway, and the gate slowly opens. I make my way up the driveway to a very large mock Georgian home, complete with detached 4-car garage, that when I see Michael's number plates, he has his initials for his cars with the numbers 1, 2, and 3, and it was the same for his wife. I was interested to see up close the sort of life this guy had, if I'm completely honest, especially as a young inspiring financier. I exited my car, brought out the pizzas, and the double doors opened. That's when I saw an unfamiliar face looking back at me. It was a man, early 20s maybe, thin and shaved head. I can remember he was wearing no shirt and some scruffy jeans and trainers. He was also holding something behind his back. "Hey, bring the pizzas through the kitchen." I can remember his voice being hoarse and barely audible, with an accent I've never heard before. Nervously I said nothing and just looked at him, which made him visibly angry. "Bring the pizza through," he repeated, more aggressive this time. I finally responded, "Where's Michael? This is Michael's place, right?" And it was completely true that in situations like this, your mouth goes completely dry, and to always follow your gut. This guy was setting off alarm bells and telling every fiber of my being to just get off the property. Unfortunately for me, that's when it dawned upon me that it's a gated property and I was locked in. This is when things went from bad to worse. I remember the terror swelling up inside me when he moved his hand from in front of him to show a large kitchen knife and uttered the words, "Run." I dropped the pizza onto the gravel, left my car, and decided I'd have a better chance of survival by running down the driveway and lifting myself over the gate. They were the wooden type, which had no decorative spears atop of them, luckily. But all the while I could hear his feet crunching onto the gravel behind me. I didn't look back and managed to pull myself up over the gate and hurling myself onto the pavement beneath me. The adrenaline in my system still had me running for what seemed like hours, but was perhaps 10 minutes at most, until I was a good few streets away, and I decided to call the police. Police met me at the park I was hiding at. One officer stayed with me and the other proceeded to go to the property, and with another patrol car. At first I got the distant impression that they didn't believe me, or thought I was up to something. But after my uncle arrived to pick me up, and vouched for me being sent there to deliver pizzas for the PC in question, backed down. Upon their arrival at the property they found nothing, just my car with slashed tires and broken windows, alongside feces smeared across parts of the kitchen. There was food strewn about the place, and also a needle found in one of the bathrooms, but no sign of the man who threatened me. Michael and his family at the time were visiting family in Australia, I later found out. I never did go back for another shift at the pizza place, and although I understand this may not be the most crazy or horrifying encounter on this subreddit, it's something that always stuck with me. Wealth and apparent financial security is just completely illusionary. People are people, and there are always some sick and tormented people out there who will always find a way to carry out their twisted actions. And if anything, I've had more encounters with crazy people since moving away from my council estate roots and into a suburbia. I've recently posted another encounter here on Let's Not Meet, in regards to something I experienced when working for one of my uncle's businesses, and coincidentally, he ended up calling me this morning. I told him about the subreddit and then subsequently explained what Reddit was, and that's when he chose to share this encounter with me. This is all verbatim, and it's not exactly a short story, so I appreciate it may trail off at some points, but I wanted to stay true to my uncle's account, hence why it's word for word. Understandably, this will irritate some readers. The following is from my uncle's perspective, and the use of I is refers to himself. This would have happened around 20 odd years ago. A very long time ago, and it's when your father and I ran the call center, doing the contracting work for various businesses, all within the financial services industry, and roughly around 50 staff, including managers and supervisors, and so on and so on. There were a lot of different then. The internet was still very much in its infancy, as was technology. We didn't have the same access to things that you would do now if you ran the same kind of operation. On top of this, we're running all of this out of a warehouse on the industrial estate right next to the gypsy camp, because that's all we could afford for the amount of floor space we needed. The campaign we're working on wasn't going as well for us. For the most part, we were just working out of phone books and the likes of leads, as data costs and still does cost a fortune. So we're under a lot of stress to meet the sort of deadlines and promises. Your father made it to the B2B clients, and we weren't in a great place. We were facing the possibility of cutting the staff down to at most 20 agents, with 2 managers. That's when I met Kevin. We heard of him from a few associates who ran with similar operations as ours, as someone who could provide leads and generally had the ability to turn companies around. So your dad got in contact with him, and went from there. We didn't actually hear back for about a month after contacting him, so we were very much in the mindset of, well, fuck all this over, close down and start something else. And on the day we hyped ourselves up to tell everyone, you've all lost your jobs, we got a fucking phone call out of the blue. Who was on the phone? Kevin. Long story short, we discussed our situation. Discussed his situation, gagged his interest, and dressed things up with a little bow on top to perk him up. By the end of the call, he agreed to come down from Scotland to meet us and discuss options in person. So on Monday, we meet with Kevin in the Hilton, and didn't like him instantly. I thought he was overbearing, condescending, and a complete egomaniac. But your father, in his infinite wisdom, decided to hear him out. And it turned out that Kevin had a huge amount of leads from one of his sources in America, and needed a team of salespeople to dial them. We need to dial 25 agents, and in return we'll get a flat amount and payment, which would allow us to move premises, upgrade equipment, etc. So we agree, and a contract was written up, and we began our venture. In order to maintain a more hands-on approach to the business and to keep his contacts in the US happy, Kevin rented a flat close to the office and would often visit the office to monitor the progress, which would normally consist of him lurking around with a coffee. It's also important to mention that Kevin had next to no people skills, and struck me as either socially awkward or maybe somewhere on the autistic spectrum, or something, as soon enough we began to get complaints from some of the other younger female staff that Alan would watch them too closely and hover around the women's bathroom, which of course we had to take seriously, but we weren't really in the position to piss the guy off who was potentially our savior. So we began to hold bullshit meetings every time he showed up to get him off the floor and into the meeting room, which for a time worked, but eventually he'd have to take a phone call halfway through and excuse himself. I later learned from one of the managers that he would hold the phone to his ear and just watch the girls closely, not saying anything, and then follow them into the makeshift kitchen area and press himself against them, or at least stand very close to them and make them ask him to move or brush past him. We decided to hold a meeting with the female members of the staff to ask them about their concerns, and to ask them if there was anything we could do to make their time at work more enjoyable. Deliberately not mentioning Kevin, just to test the waters. And one by one, they had something to say about Kevin. Some were just uncomfortable with his general demeanor, and some had been groped by him, and even propositioned, which was the final straw, really. So we decided to speak with Kevin, and cut ties and look at ways to exit the contract which is when we get an email from Kevin saying he's moving back to Scotland, and we'll be moving back to Scotland, and we'll only be making quarterly visits. So we're understandably ecstatic that our lead source remains, but contact with the staff will be limited, and we believe that no more problems shall arise. And we can wear the caring boss hats, who valiantly drove away a sex pest, which would no doubt boost staff morale. Fast forward about 12 months, and Kevin's visits have all been uneventful, and the contract is drawing to a close. And we're excited to get our cut and to expand and move on to another primary contact, with Kevin gets in touch with another plan to extend our contract, and package all our company up to be sold to a blue chip company, which specializes in the financial service industry. He acts as broker and takes a cut, but we make even more money than we originally thought, as well as half of the agreed amount. We received this particular contract was supposed to end just as goodwill gesture. He mentioned he had a few contacts in London and the US which would be interested in merging our operation into the current sales team for more dynamic sales approach, so this was something to ponder on, and we agreed to get him back. Anyway, I was thinking over the idea and decided to go to the local pub when I ran into a guy called Carl, who also ran a similar business as myself. We got to chatting and he brought up Kevin, saying something along the lines of, "You're working with Kevin Smith, aren't you?" And unsure how he knew that, asked him why. "Why would you want to know?" To which he responded with, "That guy is a fucking nutcase, mate. Honestly, the things I could tell you about him." And at first I thought, here we go. This is just more gossip and bullshit, but most likely jealousy. But curiosity got the better part of me, and I asked him, "Go on then. Why is he a nutter?" And he laughed some more, took a few sips of his lager, and off the cuff said, "You know that geezer murdered his wife, yeah?" And admittedly, I scoffed, but Carl's face was serious, stone-like and unsmiling. "No, he didn't," I said, still laughing. "He killed his wife, mate. I wouldn't make that up." I can always remember the look in his eyes when he told me that. I was unnerved, but still, you can't believe anyone in business, and I decided to probe him some more. "What happened?" I asked, or something to that effect. "I don't know the whole story. He kept it very quiet. You won't find it in the papers or in the news or anything, but basically his wife was found battered. No signs of a break-in, and the only DNA in the house was his. He's a wealthy guy, though. Never got in the press, and he managed to get off. But I tell you, he's a dodgy bloke. We had him with us in '98, and we exited out of our contract. Got loads of complaints about him. He's a perv, mate." So I'm thinking, oh bollocks. We have a murderer as our main source of income, and the guy's off of his rocker. But I don't let on to Carl, and instead tell your dad, and he says he's fine. He's eccentric from a different era, and we shouldn't just hold out a bit longer. You know what your dad's like, he gets the moral compass of a bloody war criminal, but stupidly, I relented, and we entered the new contract, and true to his word, we received half of the original agreed commission fee. So we were able to move offices, and this is when Kevin decided to move back down to the south and take permanent residency at our new office to oversee the packaging process. So he set himself up in the office opposite to the hallway of the woman's bathroom, and would spend most days on his phone or just loitering again. By that time, we had a major staff overhaul, and employees, skilled salespeople, and management staff, so we're confident that Kevin would behave, and we wouldn't have to repeat of last time, but unfortunately this was short-lived, as an administrator complained to HR that she saw Kevin having some alone time in his car, outside while watching some of the girls who would go outside to smoke. Obviously this kickstarted the rumors of Kevin being a pervert again, and his odd behavior did not help. So we decided to seek legal help and eventually were able to get out of contract. Kevin in our mindsets was long gone, and this would have been back in the early 03s, when I was working late at the office alone when I saw a figure moving through the office towards my enclosed office in the back. I knew it wasn't security or the cleaners, as securities weren't permitted to enter offices without permission when a staff member wasn't present, and the cleaners had left earlier, besides which the cleaners we had was a rake-thin Asian woman, and this figure, which was now barreling towards me, was much larger in both height and width. I stood up and moved towards the door to lock it, when I saw Kevin's face on the other side. Now Kevin was a big guy, probably about 22 stone and around 6'4". I must have been around 12 stone and 6'1", so easily pushed back and barged in through the door. I can remember going for the phone to dial security, when he gets on top of me, and instead of the beating I was expecting, he was trying to pull the watch off from around my wrist. Confused and understandably pissed, I tried to get him off of me, but his weight was making it difficult to move, and I would just remember him looking me dead in the face and without saying anything, eyes completely blank. Somehow I managed to get him off of me. I think I managed to knee him or something and ran off to the reception area, which I got security to apprehend Kevin, who was attempting to escape out of the fire exit. I wasn't hurt or anything, and I didn't press charges. You got a warning from the police, and that was that. Last I saw of Kevin. Now, this is where it gets bizarre. About 3 years ago, I bumped into Carl in Monaco, and we got talking about the old days when the topic of Crazy Kevin came up. I told him about the time he'd got into my office, jumped on me, and tried nicking my Rolex. Carl was laughing along with me, and asked when exactly was that. I told him it was back in '03, and this is what he said. I can still remember it word for word. That couldn't have been that long before he taught himself then. Shocked naturally, I asked himself to repeat what he had just said. He hanged himself in '03, had no money at the end. I'm not sure if he told you, but he remarried to this gal, who had a son. When he was liable to settle this contract with the American chaps, he tried bumping her off to get the life insurance money. Everything he owned was on finance. Everything. Didn't own anything. I was completely gobsmacked. Kevin never even wore a wedding ring, and in all the years I had known him, he never once discussed a wife or child. And although Carl is a bit of a shit stirrer, turns out Kevin rented a house opposite Carl's brother-in-law. I'll tell you what, make the stories about his first wife seem more plausible. I've also worked out why he went for my wrist. I think at first he was angry that we backed out of the contract, and he probably viewed us as responsible for his life spiraling out of control. So he probably did want to beat the shit out of me. But I think the fact that he had no money, and probably needed it quick to settle the contract and impending lawsuits, he decided to try to steal my watch to pawn it, the bastard. This is just my theory though, and he could have been off his tits. That was the end of the conversation. Hey guys, I want to thank you for listening. If you haven't yet, please consider clicking that subscribe button and bell icon to get notified of all future videos. I try to post around 5 times a week, and if you have a story of your own you would like to feature on the channel, head over to my subreddit r/GensenOfficial. And if you want early access to my videos, head over to my Patreon, where only $1 a month gets you that and some other fun perks. I've also got some merch now over on Spreadshirt. I as well offer all my videos and my podcasts that can be found on all major podcast services. All links will be located in the description field. Hope everyone's having a good night, and remember, keep it spooky.